Hi, everyone, and welcome to another live episode of the Ethicast, coming to you from the 16th Annual Global Ethics Summit here in Atlanta, Georgia, and of course, streaming virtually around the world. My guest with me right now is Geoff Martin, partner from Baker McKenzie. Geoff, thank you for joining the show.
Absolutely, Bill.
Well, I've been looking forward to speaking with you because I know you've got a lot to talk about regarding the legal challenges and the legal risks of third-party risk management, and also a swiftly changing enforcement environment, not just in the U.S., but also abroad. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think over the next couple of days, we're probably going to be hearing a lot about this, how companies can manage, evolve their compliance programs in very fluid environment. Certainly we have in the US and globally as well, both in terms of rapidly evolving regulation, but also the enforcement environment as well. And obviously the key to that is making sure that your compliance program is flexible, can adapt as it needs to. And I think one of the areas that's hardest to do that is with respect to third-party risk management due diligence. A lot of these programs are very mature, certainly our larger companies, our larger clients, and that means there's a huge number of third parties that have to go through the system. And then once they're in the system are often grandfathered in terms of their risk management. And that setup can be very thorough, but isn't always terribly adaptable. And so meeting that challenge somewhere in the middle, not overwhelming everyone with additional work is a challenge. But we've seen that recently in a number of areas, and we can look for that in the future too.
So there's been an awful lot of commentary around the swiftly changing state of third-party risk management, the expanding remit of third-party due diligence requirements. And of course, we can't overlook, the notion of regulatory change, regulatory rollback in terms of enforcement on things like the FCPA. So there's a lot of energy being spent right now on understanding where we are now and where we're going to be in the future. But something you said to me before we got rolling, I thought was really quite compelling, which is that there are some lessons we can learn from recent history that are probably worth keeping in mind as we kind of face this new context. So can you talk about some lessons learned, or at least some developments in the not too distant future that are worth keeping in mind as we try to make sense of all this?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of press about the FCPA just at the moment and changes that might bring around. And that's certainly been the focus of a lot of companies' risk management programs, due diligence programs. But having done that, you certainly got the plumbing in place for a really good foundational program that can tackle risks in a lot of areas. And the one that's been really prominent over the last couple of years has been in the trade compliance area with respect to Russia, particularly since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. All of the new sanctions export controls that came into place there really changed the risk landscape for third parties in that region. And so third parties that might have been onboarded in the former Soviet Union CIS region, who might have had a moderate risk profile under your anti-corruption program, they might not have been dealing with government officials, for example, might suddenly have become a very high risk from a trade compliance product diversion risk, because they carried on doing business and increased the amount of business that they were doing in Russia. And we saw a lot of companies obviously scrambling at the time with all of everything that was going
chaos.
on
I remember
Russia and Ukraine. It really was. And then the kind of secondary wave of that, the companies that did that really well went out and looked at their universe of customers, of even suppliers in that region, and said, okay, where do we face the risk now that the geopolitics in the world has changed in that region? What's changed about those third parties? Who might we need to revisit? Does this warrant us asking a couple more questions on our questionnaire, or pulling a bit harder on our diligence when we're out getting reports about particular things that we're interested in? And those that didn't do that end up with realizing after the fact that they've got a big risk sat out there, third parties that have been doing things driven risk that hadn't been anticipated in the first place.
So as we talk about the broadening and deepening level of third-party risk and due diligence requirements, there's been a lot of conversation around AI, around all that. But let's step back from the AI piece of it and talk about, what are some skill sets that you wish you saw more organizations kind of deepening so that they could better get that institutional muscle memory to really, kind of get a sense of what their risk is going to be and what their future risk profile is likely to look like.
Yeah. And I think the technology really helps in whatever way.
Yeah.
But I think the key is to not have a static program. And I think the risk is so much effort is put in on the front end to onboard a third party.
Yep.
You kind of figure out what their risk is at the time, get them on board, and then it's kind of a rubber stamp, and they're there forevermore, and they can go off and do other things that they weren't originally onboarded for, and create additional different types of risk, or the rules, or the world changes, and you've got this body of third parties. Now, if you've got the data well organized, fresh, you've been back to the third party to get things refreshed every couple of years, you're then sat on an extremely powerful set of data that you can dip into and say, okay, this new regime's come about. Which are the third parties that create the risk for me there? You can slice them and dice them and say, okay, I'm worried now a little bit more about products getting to China that shouldn't be getting to China going forwards. Okay, how can I look at the universe of third parties and find those ones, maybe go out and see them this year, do an audit, do something to get out ahead of that risk. Yeah. And you can really leverage that data if you keep it fresh, keep it live.
Indeed. So is there anything keeping you up at night? I, on behalf, as you look at your clients, especially, and the people that you advise, a lot of these folks are trying to figure out as they go. Obviously, I don't want you to name names of any sort, but as you look at your professional scope, are there any, and you see how everybody's trying to find their own way? Are there any patterns of behavior you're seeing? They're going, you know what? I kind of wish people would stop doing this. It's actually not. It's not the thing they think it is.
Yeah. So I mean, I think probably all companies have somewhere out there a third party or a group of third parties that are doing something that you've never anticipated. On the other side of our practice, we're doing a lot of investigations on the back end, and 90% of those investigations involve a third party who's either on their own initiative or with the involvement of company employees done something that they shouldn't have been doing. Yeah. And that's not normally the thing that the compliance team on the front end thought they had a highest risk of doing. Yeah. And so I think the companies that do well are the ones, again, that learn from those things and go, okay, this happened, we didn't expect it. How can we make sure that that doesn't happen again? Or be thinking sufficiently big to say, well, it's not going to be this back pattern again, but we're going to get surprised again, and be ready to be surprised and to see things pop up that you weren't expecting, react to those as well. So that's the most effective. That's what I'd like to see a little bit more of, I think. Outstanding.
Well, this is a topic that has sort of swallowed the sun in terms of importance. People they just cannot get enough about it. As we go forward here, where would you recommend people go to learn more information?
Yeah, so we're here for a couple of days in Atlanta, so it's always great to get down and see everyone. I've got some of my colleagues here as well, talking about similar topics, as you say. I think we're going to revisit this. I think we've got Kerry Contini and Reagan Demas from my group later today talking about adapting to geopolitical uncertainty, which touches on that, some third-party stuff there, obviously. My colleague Peter Tomczak's here later talking about mergers and acquisitions as well, and that's an area that's very important. So we're here for a couple of days. Come see us in Washington DC when we're back at home. Visit us on the website, LinkedIn, and you'll find us. So be great to catch up with everyone.
Fantastic. Well, Geoff, thank you so very much for joining us on the show today and for sharing expertise. It's always a pleasure speaking with you and your colleagues at Baker. You guys are just fantastic thought leaders, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us, Bill.
Everyone, this has been another episode of the Ethicast, coming to you live from the 16th Annual Global Ethics Summit. I'm your host, Bill Coffin. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Bye now.